I was quite surprised to find out that someone had been successfully using LinkedIn as a platform for exposing medical corruption. Jeannie has so many stories to share that I'm not sure I even had to ask any questions. But enough from me, I'll let her do the talking. Hello, and welcome back. Today with me, I've got Jeannie Andrewartha. Jeannie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Tim, for having me.
So I wanted to firstly talk about your LinkedIn expertise, if you wish, because you seem to have conquered the algorithm in terms of talking about things that usually get censored, but you've found a way to get past that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, look, I was on my third account here, so I've got a bit of
Third account.
experience, yeah. So I'm on 16,000, they say followers, but I call it joining my community because essentially it's the people who are connected to me, who follow me, who actually create this energy and conversation. And because it's not about me simply saying to people, this is my opinion or what I think. I'll present something to put into, I guess, the public square, if you like, and people can come along and give their point of view, arguments for or against. And I think most people understand where I'm going. I mean, obviously, I have my own opinions, but I think in this day and age, we've had so many politicians and experts give us their opinions. I feel my role has become essentially is to be a facilitator to help people find themselves, their true self, what they believe, what they feel in their own hearts, and to seek truth. And so, terms of LinkedIn, I think it works well with the algorithm because people are engaged. And that's, I mean, I think the LinkedIn algorithm used to be a lot better in terms of how far the reach they would allow you to have. Now I think they've tweaked it a little bit. So initially when I went on LinkedIn, and the reason I got onto LinkedIn was I was quite censored on Facebook.
Right.
All right. So I had such censorship. I was literally talking to myself. And because I'm a writer, I thought to myself, I wonder what will happen if I just go and check out what's happening on LinkedIn. And at that time, I imagine LinkedIn used to be one of those places where everyone would say things like, "Hey, I got a new job. Everyone congratulate me. I've got a promotion, so forth." And it was just a very much it was quite boring space, But when I went across, I noticed first of all a professor, Peter Miller, and he was posting a lot of stuff on COVID and so forth. And I thought, oh, this is interesting, and he had certain people follow him. And at that time, it was 2021, we were all locked down in Melbourne. So there was nothing really better to do than be online and connect to people and talk to people. Because there wasn't an outlet for communicating. There wasn't an outlet for, and since Facebook had really literally shut me down, and as someone who enjoys communication, enjoys hearing from other people, I was like, okay, let's see what's happening on LinkedIn. So I remember, and a lot of people would probably think, wow, that I'm quite bold on LinkedIn now. They would think, oh, they would never imagine that I was actually quite terrified my first post on LinkedIn. I was, yeah.
What did you think was going to happen?
Look, I think it was more a case of I'm playing in the big boys field here. I would potentially get attacked for my what I was going to post. I would be posting things about what was actually happening in Melbourne with the protests, the lockdowns, the restrictions, mandates, and so forth. And we were already quite suppressed here, so I thought, okay. And I thought people were going to come and attack me with their various versions of science and so forth. But as it turned out, I ended up having such amazing support. Like I didn't even need to defend myself. I had people come on board and come along and back me up, which was a real new thing because on Facebook...
You had people backing you up on the internet.
Yeah, to actually come into my defense. And instead of having to defend my post, which I do, as well, but people will come along and post their facts and their truth and their experience underneath. So it created this conversation. So my initial post on LinkedIn, I had 80 followers or 80 connections at the time. And one of my initial posts, I think, was 12,000, and then it got to 30,000.
Wow.
And then a lot of my posts at that time were getting 100,000 plus views. So I would go to bed at night time, put a post up, wake up in the morning, and it'd be like, oh my God, it's 100,000 plus views. And there's a lot of comments, and, and because of that, I guess I had quite a reach. People were able to come and connect to me, send me other things. So it was a real education process for myself as well. I think initially it was all about the mandates and personal freedom. And I was already down that rabbit hole a lot myself. We can go into that story later. So I guess I wasn't prepared for that journey.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how much bigger it was. And I think this is where the public square comes in play. Is like you have so many different voices, and why they really want censorship on a major level, why this misinformation and disinformation bill is being put forth in the government, is that they don't actually want us talking to each other. And why I'm here with you today, Tim, is that we talking to each other is a very, very important thing. It's our public square of getting information out to people, video being shared, and other people. It doesn't really stop just between you and I here. The ideas that we share here actually, and the stories we share, go beyond this space. And this is what was happening even on LinkedIn and other social media. It was people were sharing things that went beyond what the initial poster had intended. I think it was like when you post, you might just get whatever number of views, but for every one of those people that reads that and really connects and resonates with that message, they'll take it home, or they'll post somewhere else, or they'll take it to their colleagues, they'll take it to their friendship circles and their various networks, and it's like a ripple effect. It spreads out quite exponentially. And so they really want, as far as possible, for us to be suppressed. And I think school kind of does that to you. I was probably, I was that straight A student, didn't too many waves. I was always quite privileged in that my teachers allowed me a lot of slack. I was able, I didn't always follow the rules. But I think I didn't really, I still to some degree believed in authority, believed that the authority was essentially good. And I still do believe that most people are good, inherently good, because otherwise, why are we doing this? Otherwise we might as well just go off and find a bunker somewhere and hide it out while the carnage.
Some people have done that, and I hope to speak to some of them at some point just to ask them how it's worked out for them. But I think you're correct. I think even for someone like myself, who's a fair bit younger, and so I probably went through a bit more indoctrination, you could obviously see that things didn't always go the way they should, but still kind of deep down held that belief that ultimately government was there for our good.
Yeah, and the law. And I think that's what happened in 2021. We were still believing that we would, we'd win these court cases, and that would be it. It would be over, and that science or the data would come out and it would be all over. And as we know, we're like 2024, nothing really too much has changed. In fact, I think we've become a little bit more disillusioned with the system. And when I went to a meeting the other day, I realized that it's not the law so much that's important, it's the people behind it. It's the judges and lawyers, the integrity of the people. And a society is only as good as the integrity and the honesty of the people. And when you have lost all of that, then you lose. You can have all the wonderful laws in the world, but it's not going to make a difference, because those people who enforce the law and those people that judge and dispense it all, they actually run it, and this is what we found, that we were all quite believers. I was involved in the fundraising for one of the major court cases in New South Wales, because through LinkedIn, I met one of the major lawyers there, and we built their website and we helped with so we saw, I think we were quite involved. We saw the first court case run and how the government would bring forth, dumb experts that didn't really know anything, little bureaucrats, and how the
someone in a white coat who will say the lines that are fed to them on the teleprompter, right?
Yeah, and look, probably the court case could have run differently. They tried to go for the big hit, which a lot of the court cases have done. And it's really impossible for the judges to judge the science, right, at that time even. So they were all, they can bring their experts and our side will bring our experts, and then no one will kind of agree, and then they'll just say, oh, it's emergency powers, we had to do what we had to do. And so I think we quickly realised how corrupt the system is, and that players were all put in their place initially, which now it's all being dismantled. And you see throughout Australia, all the premiers that were involved have all been removed. Now you can believe which way they were removed, but they would have actually all wanted to stay on. So I think in a lot of ways we are winning. It may not feel like that, and I think that there's no room for complacency. I think people through all of this will possibly learn that democracy, I would say, democracy and what's good in life has to be fought for. Freedom has to be fought for. You can't. I think we all became like domesticated animals. We were just content because everything was running well. We didn't care about what was going on, and we felt that were powerless to do anything about it. But I think what this is all resulted in is a whole lot of people realizing that they have that power within themselves of having a voice and being able to create and do things. And I know for myself personally, I would never have imagined, say, interviewing some of these top scientists in the world, bioweapons expert who wrote the Bioweapons Act that said, creating bioweapons was a felony punishable by lifetime imprisonment. Would never have imagined I would be able to reach out to these people and they would come back literally often within hours or as soon as they got my email saying, yes, we want to be part of this podcast. We want to help you out here. And we all have that, people have far more, in far greater positions than I am, are able to reach out to their networks and actually facilitate incredible change. And if anyone who's watching this could realize that the actual power that they hold within their own journey, their own life journey, and look around and think, what difference can I make? Who can I push back against? How can I create the reality that I want to see for myself and my children? And this is what it's all about, isn't it? It's for the next generation. We should be here to leave for them a legacy that is better than what we experienced ourselves, to evolve.
So those familiar with your posts on LinkedIn will know that you normally talk about health and medical related subjects. How did that become a passion, or why is that a focus of yours?
Well, okay, the story of that actually goes way, way back. I think it was seeded in my soul from birth, really. I'll tell you a story. When I actually developed postpartum cardiomyopathy in 2011.
Which is?
It's heart failure related to pregnancy.
Okay.
So as a result of that and that journey, I developed a website and that helped women, and it was used by Maternity Coalition in California and I think it was Stanford or University to publish studies and so forth. But it was more the connections made through all of that. And I realized the power of being able to help other women through this very traumatic time where they were diagnosed, they just had a baby and they were diagnosed with heart failure that potentially could kill them. And women have died untreated or who just didn't have the supports in place and didn't know what to do thereafter.
Yep.
So I found that I was able to I guess being a digital, I get what you call a digital creator and being able to create websites and mailing lists and post on social media and so forth, you realize that you can reach a lot more people than a one-on-one. Yep. So if you were able to help one person one-on-one, you can help hundreds, if not thousands. And the same goes the other way around. I would be able to search online for answers for different things and find that the truths that would help me. I'd be able to work out what needed to change in my own life and what I needed to do in order to recover and heal. So that journey was... When I look back on it, I think, how did I end up with postpartum cardiomyopathy? Because I was already eating organic since 2001, quite health conscious. I certainly wasn't eating junk food, wasn't, going to McDonald's or anything like that. And it was a result of a very stressful pregnancy and having to move house. And all these external factors were totally out of my control. And I think in life, this is what actually happens. There's things that just come from nowhere that are out of your control, and you either ride the wave or you crash and burn, right? So what actually happened was the start of this journey that I had a knock on the door in 2010. We were living this kind of, a lot of people would say it was a dream life. I was working website development, we had clients that I was able to pull off Google, top of the search engine results. We had 10 homeschooled children, home birthing, homeschooling, drinking, water from the springs, raw milk from farmer. And this woman just entered our life, and the local school was at the time declining. And she brought in with us a landlord and said, I want to, I think we were concerned for your children. And we were living in a small town at that time. And I was so green, I was so naive at that time. I thought, oh my God, someone is actually concerned for my children. And all these people are judging me. I felt I needed to explain to her that my children were fine and everything was good. So I started talking to you amidst crying, because someone is entering your house. And she totally had me at that moment because I was emotionally not ready to be confronted and questioned like she was. And she found out a piece of information that we had bought milk from a local farmer. And as it turned out, this guy was a convicted pedophile. So now you would think, Tim, that knowing this information, this woman would say to me, oh, by the way, when you buy milk from this guy, make sure you watch your kids, or not that you just basically went in, poured milk, and that was it. But she decided that, and I remember seeing her eyes light up. She thought that this was the piece of information she needed to report me to the authorities, to get me in trouble, so that my children would be sent off to the local school, because the local school's enrollment was declining, and they needed, like, if you had an extra few children, that was like 10,000 a head. It was like a bounty, right?
Yeah, well, 10 of them, you're like a treasure chest.
Well, there wasn't that many within the primary school system, but, still, if it was 3 or 4, it was still enough. And when you hit a certain target, they were able to get an extra teacher. So they were sort of at that line. And so
this lady has a vested interest in getting your children into the school.
Yes. And that's actually what Child Protection, well, they weren't supposed to tell me, but they actually told me after the whole investigation process that who reported me, because Child Protection actually isn't allowed to tell you who reports you. But, I'm very persuasive. And afterwards, they told me that this was the story behind what had happened. And so she'd done this. And I'd gone through this process where all of a sudden the world that I thought I knew wasn't. And this...
Sorry, I'm a little unclear. Was she upset about the guy being a pedophile or about the raw milk?
No. She just basically wanted to get me into trouble so that my children would be sent to the local school. So that was her whole motivation. Because this local farmer was essentially a counsellor for 20 years. He was good buddies with one of the ex-prime ministers. So he was really quite high up in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of the town itself, they worshipped this guy, which was really quite confronting, because when you think of this sort of individual, you think of someone that's sitting quite excluded from the world. But then when you start asking questions in the town, you realize, it's so much part of the culture of our society that it's not talked about, and then I would start Googling and realize that at my old primary school that I went to, and I'm not Catholic, but I went to a Catholic school, and the priest there was also convicted years after and sent to jail. And I was like, so my mind was completely blown away. This reality that I had created of the world wasn't what I thought it was. And of course I went down so many different rabbit holes then. So in the end, we got a notice to vacate because our agent decided that they didn't want to defend us as a tenant. They thought we would potentially sue them because she'd brought in our landlord with her. When they found out that child protection had come, investigated, and caused all this disruption in our life, they thought, okay, we're just going to get rid of the file. We were given 6 months to vacate, and I was pregnant. And so that's, when we moved, a whole lot of troubles went down. And moving a pregnancy, it's a very bad thing. I think that a woman should be seen as sacred in her pregnancy. It's a huge process having a baby. And I was almost 40 at the time. It was my 11th child, and I was running a business at the same time, moving, and I thought I was taking it all in my stride, but obviously there was a lot of stress involved, and I ended up in heart failure. And that's when child protection comes into my life again. While I was just diagnosed in heart failure, I had we'd lost the baby, sadly, and I was in the midst of all sorts of police investigation with child protection, and right into the system. And then they actually found out that none of my children were vaccinated. And
Yep.
and at that time, look, I haven't vaccinated for 30 years, and it's never been a problem, right? It's only really the last 15 years that the narrative has kind of changed a lot. And it was a media campaign essentially, and through government and medical propaganda. Because before that, it was always like, if you want to be vaccinated, that's your choice.
Yep.
And I would never even call myself anti-vax. It was like, if you want to be vaccinated, that's like anything else. If you want to take Panadol, if you want to take any particular drug, that was your choice, and you lived with the consequences. For me, I'd made a more of a spiritual decision years ago. I'd done a statistics degree, so I saw how pharmaceutical companies could rig, results,
Yep.
and anyone who spoke out against pharmaceuticals essentially was shown the door. So I knew all of that as a background, but it really didn't play so much into my decision making. I still, thought that, vaccines potentially worked, right? For many years, but it was more the choice that I was going to trust God. I was going to trust a higher power for my health. And because years ago, I was given the choice to get a rubella vaccine, and because my antibodies supposedly were low. And I remember there was a form they put in front of me, and they said, if you choose to get vaccinated, you can't get pregnant within 3 months, or else your child's going to be born blind and deaf. And I was just like, I was like, I couldn't take that risk. And I knew that, was it 3 months? Would it be 6 months? How long would it take? I mean, they say 3 months, but it's obviously, they don't know for sure. And so I thought, no, I'm not going to go down that road. And then because I didn't want to go down that road for myself, I just walked away completely from the system. And I didn't really even put two and two together as to why my children were so healthy. I just thought that must have been the organic food I was feeding them, or just because, my spiritual journey or whatever. And it was really only years later, I remember a woman saying to me, how do you have 10 children that don't have anything? They don't have asthma. They don't have, any of these particular issues. And I didn't even really figure it out until after I dealt with postpartum cardiomyopathy, and I was added to various health groups. And in order to, figure out how to recover without, not necessarily without meds, but to support my healing. I was on such a low dose of meds, the cardiologist basically said I wasn't taking anything at all. I was on like 1.25 milligrams. And so, but then when it came to taking, going off, he was like, oh, how could you possibly wean? Such a low dose. It was really quite comical, the whole medical system. So you couldn't really, like, in that journey of recovering, I couldn't really trust the medical science, because they were telling me things like I would be on medication for the rest of my life, and if I had another baby, I would surely die. And obviously I proved them wrong. I went and recovered fully a year later, less than a year later. And then I went on, a year after that, I went on and had a baby, I did it without, I guess what you call it, free birth. I did it outside the system because I didn't want child protection in my life, because what they do and what was being done at that time was women were being bullied in this is way back in 2013, 2014. So medical bullying is not something that is actually all that new. It's only new in that it's more population wide. The general population is far more aware of medical bullying today than they were back 10 years ago. But I was quite aware of what was happening, that you'd have actually women who were intending to have a home birth, and a home birth is very safe, especially when a woman is in her element and she knows her body. And of course, like anything, if there's anything goes wrong, there is a thing called emergency. This should be an option for any woman to decide the conditions on which she gives birth. I mean, if a woman can decide whether she has a baby or not, whether she terminates a pregnancy, she should be able to, in our day and age, decide the conditions and where she gives birth. But that has not been the case. In fact, the system is very much opposed to bodily autonomy for women and for birthing women in particular, because I think it's the real underlying thing with all of that is that they want to break the connection between the woman and the baby because often in medicalized birth it's traumatic. Whether people recognize that or not, it's not a natural setting, a natural bonding setting where all those hormones are released in the right time and in the right safe space that a woman normally goes into. So, yes, I recognize that it wasn't an option for me to birth in the system, because they would have wanted ultrasounds every month. They would have pushed me on meds. And in order to force my compliance, what they would have done is they would have got child protection to come and visit me and basically use children as leverage. It is what they do. And I can speak freely now because my children are older. The state actually considers your children to be their children. And a lot of people don't understand that when you're going into the medical system, that everything is leveraged against you. So you really need to make sure you have your players in place. If you're going, you've got your own doctor that's in your corner, that you've cornered all the options. So there isn't that one person that's going to leverage the court against you by making a false statement. And they might be, they're doing their job, and they might actually think that they're doing the right thing because they've perceived you a certain way. They've perceived you as dangerous. And so there was this underlying narrative that was going around that if you didn't vaccinate your children, if you believed in natural therapies, if you lived outside the system, homeschooling, home birthing, that you were somehow a freak, not only just a freak show, but that you were absolutely dangerous. And certainly if you worked from home too, I think there was that sense that you were disconnected from a lot of people. And where I feel that the risk is right now is that people need to connect to each other more than ever. They need to establish their networks, because the only way you beat a new world order system is for people to be connected to each other in a very close way, to be able to trust each other's back, because that's where, government and the media they want you to go to the government or to the media for your knowledge, for your news, or even what we call the media is the internet. And ultimately, they want to replace all of that with AI, so that if you're going anywhere, it's like, where am I going today? I'll Google it, right? Get the address. And people get used to this sense that they're no longer thinking, right? So they'll be like, oh, what's the weather like today? And these are sort of mundane things, but then it goes a bit deeper when you start talking to AI. And this is, where the meta is put into place. They don't actually, Google at the moment is systematically destroying search, the ability to actually search for information. It's getting a lot harder. Like, it's still possible. You still know how, you can still do it. But what essentially it'll be done is that they'll want to make it so difficult to search for things that you will just ask AI or their appointed voices.
Yep.
Right? They're appointed trusted doctors, trusted specialists, which is where I'm encouraging people who have knowledge of certain areas, who are authentic and are pro-humanity and pro-freedom, to find that courage to speak. Because when you put things out in the public forum, when you put things out in the public square, it doesn't go back in the box, right? So as it turned out, Tim, my children ended up having to get checked by a pediatrician because it was like so unusual that I had 10 of them
Yeah.
and they were all healthy. My God, without a doctor, they were actually healthier. They'd never seen a doctor for illness. So as it turned out, the pediatrician, found that they were healthy, and Child Protection didn't even send a letter saying goodbye because they really weren't supposed to be involved. In fact, this whole check was completely illegal because they had sort of twisted a GP's arm that we didn't even know to write up the referral, which is, you can't simply force a family to go to a pediatrician on no basis when their children are completely healthy to have a health check. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can imagine if you had a sick child and the amount of less power that you can, because they can actually sever parental rights.
Yeah.
And this is what has actually happened in Melbourne. I think there's a great book called Sarah's Last Wish, and a book about a woman, a child who was separated from her parents. And the parents she was terminal, and they wanted to essentially experiment on her in Melbourne. And she died in hospital with, I think her parents are only allowed to see her once a week. It's horrific. The story of medical abuse. And I think sometimes these doctors, perhaps they think that they're doing the good in the end justifies the means, that what they're going to get out of the data that they perhaps are going to get out of all of this justifies putting people through this kind of lab rat situation. And, this question of ethics here. And I feel like that sort of went on sort of during COVID. That was this idea that, okay, we're faced this thing that we don't know about. So let's vaccinate everyone and see what happens, even though the data was already out there that they knew that it was going to be bad.
Yeah.
They knew that it was harmful, and that even if you didn't want to believe that, the studies and so forth and what came out in the records, it was the case that when there was reactions and people were dying, it should have been pulled a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're still here now, and it hasn't been pulled. I think what they pulled are AstraZeneca, and the actual the original ones, the original Pfizer's, you can't actually get anymore because they've changed that to some other one, that those aren't available anymore, which is sort of ironic that we still have mandates for the two shots and the third, even though you can't really even get the original. So they kind of had to reword it, and that all these reactions are coming, all the truth is coming out, and we've got ambulances everywhere and all of this happening amongst us. And it's so dark. It's so dark that, people aren't able to freely talk about it. I love to hear the stories of people who have loved ones who to be seen to be mainstream, not just in the fringe internet. But where are these stories on the news? Why is the media silent on this and not really showing the huge level of cover up? Because it wasn't just that the reactions happened, and it was the cover up afterwards. Like, for example, I had a phone call from a friend who knew of another friend's daughter who was quite well known online, and she had a terrible reaction. She had clots through her, stroke almost, and she was sent home from hospital. And the reason why she went to hospital and they sent home was because the whole compensation scheme is based on if you have to spend one night in hospital in order to get the government compensation. So they would be sending people away and not getting treatment. Or then I have another friend who is
This is compensation for vax injuries from the
that's
COVID shots.
from Centrelink. Yeah,
you had to spend a night in hospital to be able to claim that.
Yeah, and there's certain criteria. So if your side effect isn't listed as for that particular vaccine, then you don't qualify. So I mean, it's pretty tragic, and I think they basically
There's always a
said
catch, isn't there?
they basically said that your life is worth $30,000. That's kind of like the cap mark on it, and we heard of all sorts of things going down during COVID. Things that people say, well, where's the proof? You can't substantiate. But I think if the police wanted to investigate and they look into certain people's bank accounts, they'll find the proof if they want to look for it. But no one really wants to look. I think it's all been, I'm not sure if it's this collective shame at all. But we know that it was really not just about the jab. It's about absolute control. Really the control of people's minds and bodies and souls. It's more of a journey. Yeah, it's not like, I think where I started with it was a lot of people who were in the anti-vax movement thought, okay, if we didn't get it, we'd be safe.
Yeah.
That was the thinking. And a lot of people probably still think today, I'm wealthy enough to be safe from it. But you're not safe. If I'm in the middle of nowhere living my own life and doing my own thing, not against anyone, or in the system, am not safe. And if none of us here in Victoria, they basically came after to everyone. Nobody is safe. They'll crush the economy. They'll push people through various things. And this whole thing was a bioweapon, and this is what people don't realize through shedding, and it's all in the scientific literature. People can go to Health Alliance Australia's website and their YouTube channel, and they'll see the experts that I've interviewed that talk about what was done and how the shedding will impact all of us to some degree, where obviously those of us who didn't take it are less affected. But even myself, I ended up back in heart failure in 2022. It was even worse than the first time. I was well for 10 years. I caught, COVID, or was it what was it? Who knows? It was a positive PCR test. And my COVID was pretty mild. I was just tired. We were forced to isolate at that time. And we did. 4 months later, I knew something went wrong with my gut. Sick in bed for 3 weeks. At the end of it, I ended up with a little bit of swelling. So I thought, look, I just better check. I went into hospital because I wasn't able to get my blood pressure down, wasn't able to get all the fluid off me. And they found my heart was at 15%. So, and a lot of, I've got friends who are unvaxxed or unvaxxed children, and they're quite marginalised because they don't really fit in any particular box. They're not vax injured, and they're injured from COVID. So then but they're not pro-vax. So it's like they're in this no man's space. That's why I kind of openly speak about the fact that we're all in the same boat here. Some of us are a bit further down the creek, but
further up the creek,
or off the creek, yeah. But and it's all a little bit about. This is where I do share a lot of information of what I've learned. I've become my own little experiment in terms of being able to recover and what's necessary. And a lot of people don't realize what's necessary. And you have your other doctors out there, offering their various things. And look, it might help people alleviate some of the symptoms, but underlying, we have this thing out there that is causing mass inflammation, mass harm on a cellular level, and you need to be as healthy as you can be, and that's everything.
When you say you became your own experiment, what do you mean?
Well, basically, you do your research, right? And everyone's got their little protocols out there. There's literally hundreds.
I've heard a few.
Hundreds of protocols out there. And not all of them are good. Like some of the things that are being asked can actually be harmful. So you have to decide what you're going to try. And for me, niacin with nicotinic acid niacin, which is the full flush version, was a big game changer. Dealing with the gut issues, and I use pine oil, which is an ancient remedy. Dr. Jennifer Daniels, I'll call it pine oil so it doesn't get flagged.
Pine oil.
Yeah, it's derived from distilling the sap of a pine tree.
Right.
And so small amounts of it. It will actually is antiparasitic, antifungal, antiviral, and it
Is
also heals the gut.
that's one that has a common name that we won't mention here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, and that it was interesting because there's actually a herbalist online. He was very popular on YouTube and various different remedies, and he actually had that particular substance mixed with honey. And I remember telling a friend years ago about it and how it would heal her of heal her of celiacs, not being able to eat gluten. And at that time, she watched the podcast with Dr. Jennifer Daniels. It was called The Gluten-Free Trap. On it, she did her own research. She came back to me and said, "Oh, look, I found this particular YouTube channel. I'm going to do it with honey." And she did. And within days, she was able to eat gluten again. So it was sort of funny because about this stage, I actually hadn't ever tried it myself. But I just said to her, "Oh, look, I've seen this." And then she went and did her own research. And I think this is the whole journey of it all, isn't it? That people, you don't necessarily need, don't follow me, don't, make up your own mind and see what works and what doesn't work for you. So I had that experience with various people who had tried this substance. And I had it in my cupboard. And I tried it before, but I remember I got to the third week and I was delirious really when I was really sick in 2022. When you're really sick, you can't actually think straight. So you'd be on forums, you'd be reading stuff about long COVID or whatever. Say, "Oh yes, I'll try this." And I made a few mistakes in the sense that I think I tried what was it? When you bone broth, right? And I'm a vegetarian, but I thought, okay, bone broth to restore the gut and all that. And that is actually a big no-no because it's full of histamines. And so it all basically mass inflammation there. But I was already so sick anyway. And then it was only when I had this substance mixed with honey, it was really only a very small amount, I just felt instantly that I could think again. And this is the most important thing. And then I took some niacin and I vomited straight after that. So it was like a purging. And I was able to, at that point, to suddenly realize, oh my God, I actually need some help here. I need to figure this out. And I realized I'd put on excess weight through fluid and that potentially I was in trouble. But I didn't really know for sure. It was only a friend had sent some flowers along, and incidentally those flowers had triggered a memory because it was exactly the same flowers for when the last time I was in hospital with the near-death experience. So it was like it was meant to be, you know what I mean? Like it was like, okay, it was
So
meant
it's
to
the
be.
last time I was in hospital with a near-death experience.
Yeah, I've had like 4. So I'm thinking maybe I should live a bit more dangerously. And I think really to some degree, that's why I don't worry, because I'm still here. And I'm obviously, I feel like I have whatever calling, whatever mission I have in life, I'm supposed to be here. And I think through this whole thing, I've met people, and I'm in particular friend who really encouraged me to find that mission, to find what you are here on earth to do. And that is where I had to really search within my soul to look back into my childhood. And I realized that I've always been here to combine 2 areas, and that is communication and writing with health. Because when I was young, I was 14 years old, I wrote this journal entry. And this journal entry in it had, I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to be a journalist. And that journal entry also talked about how I bet on this horse called Testimony. And my teacher at that time, her name was June Stewart. Now, June Stewart is the mother of Tony Stewart, who is one of the Balibo 5, who was killed in East Timor. Now, she never really spoke to us about it. She was this old English, she spoke perfect English. She would say tissue to you, and she was very lovely old lady. She never really spoke about her son. But she grabbed me when she saw this journal. And she said, oh my God, she's like, you've got the same birthday as my son. One of my sons is a journalist and one of my sons is a doctor. You can be both. And here's the clincher, was the horse that I bet on for some random reason that weekend. I've never bet on horse. I don't bet on horses. I was like 14 years old, was her horse. And it won. and the horse's name was Testimony. So this was, whether I knew it or not, this was like a defining moment in my life. And she really encouraged me to write. And I remember her reading to the whole classroom an essay that I'd written on world peace. It was people would probably you'd find it funny, Tim, because it was all like, world peace will be achieved through the UN and all that sort of. But
You're right. I would find that funny.
Yeah, it was. But it was brilliantly written. I mean, I look back and think, my God, how did I write that when I was 14? And I remember reading the winning piece, and the winning piece was how world peace would be achieved through each individual finding peace in their own heart. Now, you can imagine that is such a turnaround to today, because today my peace will probably have won, right? But the winning piece was on an individual level.
Yeah.
World peace is achieved through each of us individually finding peace within our own hearts. So it's interesting how that journey went. So she really was quite, she encouraged me to write. And I remember I wrote to an author, M.E. Kerr, a children's author. And she came back and she sent me this beautiful card that I still have. And I asked her in one question, I said, how do you become a writer? And she wrote to me, she goes, you become a writer by read, write. And that was her answer. And so I've kept these things in my heart for all these years, that in learning to write it's simply like you do it. You simply achieve your goals by doing it. And so I've managed to sort of combine these two things of communication, writing, and now more public speaking and podcasts and the health advocacy through. So I've become that doctor, and I wouldn't have wanted to be a doctor now. I was saved from that career.
Now knowing what doctors have to do.
but I guess health, that was my passion. And also in a way I fulfilled that legacy, that baton that was handed to me by a teacher whose son died for freedom. And to me, probably the saddest part is I never really got to see June Stewart before she died. But to me, she was very instrumental in my journey. And then I think during COVID, I realized, and this whole pandemic year, that I actually have a responsibility to manifest or to help others, just as I pay it forward as others have helped me in my journey. That it's that time to do that. And like people think, one of the things that helped me, even though it was a bad thing at the time, one of the things in my past that helped me understand what was going on in Victoria was in 2014, after I'd had Jose, my last baby, at home, and I went into hospital for a check just to make sure everything was all right. And as a home birth, probably red flags were going off, but they gave me IV saline way too quickly, and they sent me into heart failure. But at the time, they actually told me it was my fault because I drank too much coconut milk water and ate too many bananas. And look, when you're in a really dire situation, right? You believe anything. Like I actually really, for months, I believed it was my fault that I had drunk too much coconut water and eaten too many bananas, and that's why my potassium was high. But it wasn't until I was watching some video channels and I discovered that if you give IV saline to someone too quickly when they're dehydrated, you can actually cause a heart attack. So they'd actually sent me into heart failure, and my potassium levels went sky high. And then they put me in ICU, and they basically, tortured me there, and I was, interfered with there, and I was going to report that, but because I had a baby, they were going to they made it clear that they were going to use child protection against me. But one of the things that happened to me in that hospital was, after 5 days of literally no sleep and doctors coming in every hour to tell me why my blood pressure wasn't coming down, was that it was a form of mental torture. It was actually, when you actually look at yourself, when you're in ICU, you're sort of attached to all these tubes. You can't move. You've got people injecting all sorts of various things to you, and you can say no, but there's a lot of pressure. But when you're actually denied sleep, because there was this jackhammer going off, and people coming in all the time, and then you have them standing over you. And I remember one doctor, she came in with one of those do not resuscitate forms, actually. And he basically threatened me and said, look, the way you're going, you might as well sign one of these,
Wow.
do you know? And then they found a bit of blood, and they decided that, yes, he found some other guy to come in, some other doctor come in, and they did an internal, and I was screaming no. And he whispers into me, brings me over at the end and whispers me into my ear and says, doctors get really excited when they see blood. And that was really done in a very powerful way, to put me in my place. And then he said, we're going to just give you an ultrasound of your uterus, and it's probably going to be an internal, which it wasn't. But it was all, threats to subjugation. So I was put in a normal ward, and at that point, they sent in a nice doctor. She was lovely. She was a lovely doctor. And she convinced me to have a D&C, even though I was not really bleeding. I wasn't even really bleeding at all, because they apparently found a piece of placenta in one of the ultrasounds. And this is literally how it's done. Through medical tests, they'll show you what it is, and they will convince you to do something. And so I remember at the time signing that form and agreeing to it, even though my blood pressure was way over 200. It was totally out of control, and it was particularly dangerous, to do it. And then I just broke down and I cried, and I realized, my God, they have actually broken me to go against what I truly believed in life. And how I actually got through that time was because I had my phone with me. So I was still able to contact the outside world. And I had various groups, free birth groups, various crunchy friends.
Crunchy friends?
Crunchy mums are like, no tox, or they're all natural mums. They they eat organic and, don't use chemicals or anything. So that's the definition. You don't know. You've never heard of crunchy before, Tim. So I had various friends, and one of my crunchy friends, actually, she came in because when they sent me into heart failure this time, I had a baby, and so I didn't want him to have formula or anything. So she actually came and breastfed him for me. So and I remember I didn't even ask her to put it in a bottle. I just said, just breastfeed him. And he still remembers that. He still remembers it even now. He says he's second mum, and I think she only breastfed him once or twice. But that's the thing is, human touch. This is what was. I don't even know why, but it was just like instinctively you knew. And I put out a call on Facebook. I think someone said a wet nurse. I think it was really quite because that's the description of them. And it just came to me. So I was quite broken at that time. The reason I was able to navigate that path was because I had other people who would say, well, this is what happened to me, and you can go this way or that way. And I got to the point where I realized that if I didn't get out of hospital, if I didn't leave, that I was going to probably die in hospital, because I was just so denied. 5 days of literally no sleep and my blood pressure through the roof. I thought I can keep on staying here and they can keep on telling me what they want to do, or I can just go home. So I did. I discharged myself. I went home and I was pretty much...
And they let you out?
Yeah, because you're allowed out because the baby wasn't a patient, only I was. And I just... So long as you sign the risk form that you do this at your own risk. So I was allowed out.
Whenabouts was this?
This was 2014.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but
I don't think they'd let you out these days.
No, I think legally it's the children that they under COVID rules they can make you stay because, during the COVID time, they could say you've got some sort of biological, weapon inside you. So therefore, we've tested you. So therefore you can't leave. We can use quarantine and emergency power rules to stop people from leaving. But now
I've heard people tell me stories that make hospitals sound like Hotel California. Kind
do
of
they?
like you don't have to check in, but once you do, you can never leave.
I think it depends on the strength of the person. And like I was quite conscious at the time. I think if people are going in to see any medical professional, I say professional with inverted commas, they should always have someone that can advocate for them with them. Because two are stronger than one. You're always very vulnerable, especially when, they're presenting medical tests to you. So I went home and I looked up some, diet, which is, plant-based, no oils. Did that for a week. Blood pressure dropped 50 points. I was fine literally from pretty much day one. I just needed a good night's sleep, and I was good as gold. And they sent child protection the next day to me to make sure that I was not going to report anyone for what happened. And they pretty much left. By this stage, I was like a warrior queen. Because I'd gone through it so many times. I understood the system. You don't break. You don't show any emotion. You obviously you neither way. You're not neither angry nor upset, because if you show emotion, that's your point of weakness. You have to treat it like a sort of a business transaction, and really put the fear of God into them too. That you're going to go after them, and the next time round you're going to sue them for everything. And even as bad as the court system is, they still fear that sense of having to go through. And
They fear the public knowing.
yeah, they do. If you think about it, we were like domesticated animals before. We were well fed. We didn't really look around and, know what was going on. So therefore, we were easily subdued because they had us all penned in and trapped. Where now we've got a lot of wild animals out there and who are much more alert. They're watching. For example, the move to digital currency and the control thereof is now the counter it all is people are going and using cash. And we're seeing a huge uptake in cash. And we're winning that war. I was at the supermarket the other day. My dad wanted some pens and I got stuck there. And I asked the lady, are people using cash more? And she said, oh, yeah, absolutely. She goes, I don't know why, but more people are using cash. And I said to her, what percentage do you think are using cash? She goes, 30 to 40%. Now, this is just, obviously, that's through the checkout. So the people who are actually using a person checking out are going to be more awake anyway than the people that are going through self-checkout. But still, it's still a fairly nice chunk, right? So they sort of, and then there's the creative aspect of how people will respond by using cash and creating these alternative markets, alternative communities of sharing knowledge, sharing skills, building businesses, which is kind of the next step, I guess, of creating this community of like-minded people. I think there has to be some sort of way of creating what we're doing in a very organic way that supports the truth, supports advancement of humanity and spirituality and all that, without getting into the money being the root of all evil and compromising who we are, because we've got to worry about where the money is coming from in order to fund the work that we do. And I'm not really even sure where that goes, because I see a lot of online people are now pushing certain supplements, pushing a certain group that has infiltrated literally all of them. And one of the things that they're actually pushing is Tamiflu, which is, very toxic.
Is what, sorry?
Tamiflu. Like, this is for the next pandemic, that this is the alternative media. So they've got, their various concoctions of drugs and things. And then they're not really even telling the people the truth about how you need to be prepared, like physically beforehand, right? You can't just, this is the reactionary aspect of sickness. People think that if I've got a headache, I'll take something. or if I've got a medical problem, I'll do something. But health is actually, like, if you look at the health of animals,
They don't see the symptoms as the reaction to,
yeah,
I've obviously done something wrong, hence this is why the reaction is I have a headache. You're saying people think I've got a headache, can't be caused by anything. I do something to resolve the headache.
yeah, and often it's dehydration, right? So how do you resolve that? Is you make sure that you're hydrated every day so that you no longer get headaches and your minerals are balanced and so forth, or you're getting enough sunshine, you're doing enough exercise, walking, and all of that's on a holistic level. And one of the most powerful methods of healing actually is water fasting, which people have come around to doing. It's obviously not that attractive. It doesn't make money. Like, it doesn't make money for people, right? And this is our whole economy is and why I think it's going to take a little while to dismantle, because, for example, even in Victoria, one of the biggest industries is the medical industry. A lot of people's money is heavily invested in medical science. So how do we turn that around to people earning or being able to live without an industry that is essentially poisoning people, but of course it does good as well. So, there's that yin and that's yang, and how do we create that balance? It's, a complex question that I guess that's why I believe in the public forum. I believe in the ideas forum, because there's a lot of complex things that aren't going to be solved with easy solutions, like that people think that we'll just follow one person, or we'll just do what this person says, or some president will get in and everyone will just follow him and he's going to fix everything. And look, it's obviously it's important to have good leadership, right? Yep. We absolutely need, but just because a certain president gets in or doesn't get in November is not going to change things, because fundamentally it's the shift in people. It's the people on the ground level that have that integrity, the ethics, the love for other people that will change and transform the world.
Well, Jeannie, it's been great having you here. There's, I think, endless things that we could talk about.
Yes.
And I think you've got crazy and wild experiences. But if people want to talk to you more or learn more about your experiences and the things you've learnt, they can find you at Uncensored Wisdom. That's your blog, yes?
Yeah, uncensoredwisdom.com.
.com or .au?
No, just .com. You don't do .au because you'll be cancelled.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yes,
I mean, there's much
that.
more freedom with the .com because they're global, and .au falls under the AUDA regulations.
Right.
You still have to be a company and fit various criteria and rules. So they can do that. They can come along to LinkedIn. They can find me.
That's Jeanee Andrewartha on LinkedIn.
Jeanee Rose Andrewartha.
Jeanee Rose. Okay.
Yes, I'm Rose.
We'll put the link in the description of the video.
Yeah, and they can go check out Health Alliance Australia's.org YouTube channel and the videos that I've done there. I will be relaunching myheartsisters.com.
Okay, great.
And if they want website development or hosting or any of that, passioncomputing.com.au. I think that's it. I don't know how many more websites I can launch. But I'm sure I'll if they go to uncensoredwisdom.com, if I do launch any other things, and I'm thinking perhaps of even doing some interviews with people from LinkedIn, just rejigging the uncensoredwisdom.com and interviewing people there on a professional level. But, there's only so much time in the day.
Yeah.
There's more dreams that we can hope to achieve. And I've obviously got children that have their own dreams of businesses that they want to start as well. So it's kind of a bit of a juggling act life, but it's fun. I think, I think we are well on our way to making a new world for ourselves. All of us, as dark as things are, I think fundamentally, there's huge changes. It's unstoppable. So thank you, Tim, for what you're doing. I will
pleasure.
share this with my network as well.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully you'll acquire a lot more followers and you create your own community as well.
It's not about creating followers, but it is absolutely about getting people to talk to each other again and creating connections so that we can get back to helping each other one-to-one rather than relying on Mr. Big Brother to do that for us. I think that's how we got ourselves into this mess. Thank you for joining me, Jeannie, and good luck with all of your different ventures.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I'd love to know what you thought of the interview, so drop a comment down below. And remember to check out Jeanee on LinkedIn and on her website. Catch you next time.